Waiters, what dating disasters have you witnessed? I was bartending at a restaurant in San Francisco. This guy came in and ordered a vodka martini. He downed it and ordered another. Halfway through his third he called his wife and asked for a divorce. After he hung up we talked about the Red Sox. I'm from Boston. I was bartender at a country club in college and I watched a woman curse her husband out at their table because the husband kept flirting with the waitress. She got really loud and walked out. Keep in mind this was a nice restaurant at an upscale country club. The waitress felt it was all her fault, but she told me the guy had been coming in there often and tipping her 100% of the bill every time. I worked briefly as a waiter at a semi-nice place near me. I had a couple come in for a date who we've seen there a few times before. I think it was their regular dating place. She was very clearly sad, and was talking about how her uncle was really sick and was probably going to pass away soon. He decided to pull out the ring and pop the question anyway. Seriously, dude? Read the room. Bartender here. A couple on a blind date took their seats directly across from the dishwasher, so I had to pretend I couldn't hear him. 40 plus, balding, overweight, and drunk, asking her, 30 plus, pretty, friendly, and level-headed, listen. I see you over there, just amazing and gorgeous, and I'm wondering what you're seeing in me. What do you think? She smiled/cringed and made an effort to sidestep his questions and change the subject at least 3 times, while he ordered shots of Fireball, at an upscale establishment, for both of them. She would politely refuse, and he would end up drinking both of them. He didn't seem to be big on learning. I used to work at a bar where 70% of the customers were on Tinder dates. There was a line of 2-person booths along the wall when you first walk in. There were 2 dudes sitting by themselves in 2 different booths. Both of them were facing the door, one was in the first booth, one was in the last booth. This girl comes in and walks up to the first booth, says hi to the guy, and sits down. They are chatting for about 5 minutes when the other guy who is sitting by himself comes up to her and says, "Hey, I'm so-and-so. Aren't you so-and-so?" They all talk for like 30 seconds and she gets up and goes and sits with the other guy at the last booth. Eventually a different girl shows up for a date with the guy at the first booth. I don't know exactly what happened, but I almost died watching it unfold. She was definitely embarrassed. I worked fine dining in Vail, Colorado. I once saw a lady throw red wine all over a guy's shirt and leave. He sat and continued eating his spaghetti plate. No fucks. A couple of friends and I went to the Mexican restaurant where another friend was waiting tables. There was a couple kind of catty-cornered from us that had a bit of an off vibe. We could see them, but not really hear them, so we asked our server friend what was up. She said it seemed to be a first or second date that was a bit awkward. The girl had ordered one of those enormous margaritas, and was not sharing it. I had to go make a phone call, back in the payphone days, and when I came back, I ended up sitting with my back to the couple. Maybe 10 minutes later, I hear our friend the server say, "No, no, no," and the sound of a full punch bowl being emptied from a great height. Giant margarita girl had stood up, swayed a bit, and vomited all over their meals, table, and the surrounding floor. The restaurant comped everyone sitting nearby, and the girl's date abandoned her in the ensuing chaos. This happened to a friend of my wife. She met a guy on a dating site, they agreed to meet at a strip mall parking lot and go to dinner together from there. He asks if he can drive her car, because it's a Camaro and he's never driven one. So they go together in her car, to a restaurant a couple miles away. Dinner goes okay, nothing too crazy. Then he gets up to go to the bathroom and never comes back. After 10 minutes, she gets up to check on him, and her car is gone. He's dashed on the bill and stolen her car. She pays the bill, and gets an Uber home, and calls the police to report her car stolen. Turns out the guy just left it in the parking lot where they originally met, and seems to think he did nothing wrong. Last I heard he's still being charged with auto theft. I used to bartend at a yard house in the before times. Yard House is a corporate place that's basically a nicer sports bar with a ton of beer on tap with stupid, giant novelty glasses. I had a couple at the bar during happy hour drinking from one of the big glasses and they ordered some onion rings that were half price. He jokingly proposed with an onion ring and she started laughing and jokingly said yes. Then he busted out an actual ring, she wasn't laughing anymore. I used to work as a hostess at a thank deity it's the weekend already. Guy makes a reservation at the most booked table. It's by the window, all romantic etc. also super visible from any other part of the restaurant. Comes in, all dressed up and with a suitcase. Strange, but okay. A few minutes later, his date arrives. They laugh, flirt, we actually thought it's an anniversary or he's going to propose or something the way it was going. Nope. Halfway through the evening she starts screaming at him. He broke up with her and actually packed her suitcase. Then paid and left her there sobbing at the table alone. We got her a brownie on the house, because just watching that we felt fucking awful. Bartender for a couple on a Tinder date. They talk for about an hour, he goes to the bathroom but left his jacket on the back of his chair with his wallet and keys in. She stole them, stole his car, and went shopping. That poor schmuck refused to call the cops for an hour because it was going so well. I felt bad for him. Not my story, but my partner just told about this happening at his work. We live in a pretty large university college and one time a guy came in with a plant for a date. He sat with it at the table, ordered it food, drinks, and dessert. He was a total gentleman to the plant. Turns out he lost a bet with his frat brothers. I kept my interaction with the table brief, but I'll never forget the time I had a couple come in and as I was setting down the entree the lady looked at her man stone cold, pointed to his phone and said, "So who this hoe you been texting?" Me, of course, neither being the hoe nor texter in question, made definite haste away from that conversation. I do remember her asking to split the bill at the register too. Couples fight in restaurants a lot. That or maybe they argue everywhere. I couldn't say. I worked as a waiter for years and I could not begin to count the number of arguments I saw. But one guy comes to mind above all of them. This guy must have been 50 to 60 years old and got angry with his lady. He actually threw a snit and stomped off and was wandering around the restaurant and looking back at her and scowling. It was like a child throwing a temper tantrum, but most children aren't even this dramatic usually. It was nauseating to watch. Not a waiter, but I saw a first date next to me. In short, girl states she has an allergy to pineapple, guy says okay in a I don't believe you kinda way. At some point he scraped some pineapple glaze off his dessert and onto her spoon when she popped outside to make a call. She comes back and eats without noticing too much, has a severe reaction. Guy freaks out and tries to run but gets stopped by my girlfriend who is suspicious of him. Manager administers the girl's EpiPen and ambulance and police are called. Absolute clusterfuck situation. I watched a proposal in the dining room of the hotel I worked at. Everyone was eagerly awaiting the dessert and ring box to be brought out. She saw the box and just started saying no 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 no, and told the crushed groom, "We need to talk." People who initially were clapping just slowed to a dead silence. She ended up going back to the room, collecting her things and leaving, while he cried at the table for a few minutes. It was super depressing for all the staff, guests and that poor guy. Not a waiter, but once witnessed a woman ghost her date at the end of the night. It was a fancy jazz club, and the couple racked up what I assume was at least a $500 bill. There was a ton of wine and they went through a few expensive entrees. When it came time to pay, the woman snuck out while the man was in the bathroom, and just disappeared. The dude was distraught frown. I once had a couple that I didn't realize was a couple, and once they were done with their meal I asked if they would like separate checks because I honestly thought the woman was the man's mother, and they looked at me with confused/offended expressions and replied with "One check please." They're now regulars who come in almost every week and despise me. Edit, I was much newer to the job when this happened. I know how to read a table better. 9/10 times I just ask at the beginning if the bill is going to split in any way if it's more than one couple. That way I know how to organize the bill. Not sure it necessarily counts as a dating, but it was indeed a couple's disaster. When I was in high school I worked as a line cook at a chain pizzeria. It was a slow Sunday morning, mostly elderly customers coming in after church. We had a couple come in, get seated, order food yada yada yada. 30 to 40 minutes later I just hear shouting coming from the dining room. Apparently they had selected our little franchise as the place to sort out their differences and try to discuss it in a civil way. It stayed civil for a very short time. Guy gets up to leave. Unfortunately they decided to take a single car together to the restaurant. So he does the logical thing, uses the store phone to call the police non-emergency line and get a ride home. Giga brain move. Police show up, my shift ended at this point, but as far as I know they did not end up giving that man a ride home, and he was told that the purpose of the police department was not to give rides. Had this couple on a date and they seemed to be having a really good time, with the girl saying how much she had enjoyed everything. Until his wife walked in and joined them. My favorite was a couple who asked to be seated on the patio, and chose the furthest table from other guests. I go over to greet them with a smile and some good energy, and the woman locks eyes with me and says this is not going to be a fun evening. The guy with her then tries to order a margarita and she said you can have a Coke, and proceeds to order a Cosmo for herself, and they both get burgers. I go in to tell the hosts not to seat anyone near them, and for the next hour this woman lays into the guy while he sat there and took it. Clearly he had fucked up in a major way, from the snippets I heard, and she was explaining to him in great detail the way he had fucked up, lost her trust, and it was over. She was incredibly civil, unflinchingly polite, and so confident. She finished, handed me her card, and walked away with him still at the table after she left me a solid 30% tip. She was awesome. I want to be her when I grow up. Not really a disaster, but a funny story. I was a waiter at a nice restaurant, got two young people coming in, obviously on a first date. The girl say to me at some point that she have a seafood allergy, then the guy order seafood right after that. It took him a couple of seconds after I asked him if he was sure it was a good idea, with a knowing look, to understand what I meant. He ordered some chicken. You know, you really should not kiss someone who ate seafood if you have an allergy to that. I hope the rest of the date went well for them after that. Oh, I worked at a fancy place so I saw a lot. The worst was when this guy got down on one knee to propose. Just as this other guy came in and his girlfriend told him that she was leaving him for the other guy and had been having an affair for 6 months. They had invited him out so he hopefully wouldn't make a scene. The two of them left him at the table, sticking him with a $200 bill. We all pitched in to pay it and bought him a couple drinks. When I was 16, my aunt was organizing a wedding buffet and hired me for the night as a waiter/helper. I was attending the back tables when a woman with too little dress and too much alcohol, yelled, "You should have married me instead. Fuck that bitch." And run to full soap opera girl fight the bride, pulling hair, trying red wine on the white dress, slapping her face.